Well, there you are. Again. Charlie Greer podcast. I do this every day. Today. So, Relativity Records, Lovenginear. Before we start, please like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, do so by going to the info and the description for Zelle. Let's do this. So, Relativity Records, Lovenginear. I was in a band called Lovenginear back in the day. I used to sing. Um, and wrote all the lyrics. Basically, this main songwriter, the guys would like come up with riffs, but they'd be like 8 minutes long, and I'd have to arrange um, and Relativity Records was a record label out of New York, and then they had offices in Chicago. So what happened was, I was watching a podcast earlier uh, by a guy. It's called Before I Forget, and he's got a podcast. Go check him out. Before I Forget, and he talks about his experiences in the music industry and all this other stuff. So I watched one of his, and he mentioned Relativity, and it sparked a memory in my brain, like, oh yeah. So thank you. Before I forget, because that's what I mean. You forget about this stuff. You got to lay this stuff down. I'm in my 50s now, man. So, anywho's it. I was singing in Lovenginear, my band. We're like a heavy rock band, loud. Uh, and we started getting popular. Released a CD in '92, and we were like moving units. We were selling CDs, and before that, we had a tape that was selling. Uh, and we were like one of the best selling like indie bands in town. Even though other indie bands had like support and this and that and the other, we were selling much more, much more. I had record stores that hated my band for some reason because they're all like, "Oh, you don't sound like the Replacements or whatever." We started moving units, and they're like, "Hey, they're inviting us to like parties." So we were moving around, and just before the internet, so there was a lot more labels, a lot more just everything, a lot more management, a lot more fanzines, a lot more record store. I mean, you name it. Even in the early '90s, it was still popping off. Um, so '92, our CD came out, and we're by then playing with other bands. We're like, we're not touring, but we're playing like the regional area, and we're playing with other bands, sometimes bigger bands. And you swap CDs, you get to know people. Sometimes you perform a few times, and then they go back and tell their people or their managers there, and like, hey, give me your CD, I'll give it to so that gets the word out. And we had at the time I was working at a record store in Champaign Urbana, Illinois, and they were starting a label, or what they were trying to. They never got off the ground. Um, uh, and I knew some of these bands had already been signed and taken money, and their albums. Matter of fact, they didn't sell one album. Some of these hipster bands that people thought were so great never sold a album, and these kids would come in and like press a 7-inch and sell like 1,000, yet get ignored because these like hipster, college types. Oh yeah, this stupid. They ruined it for everybody. And then those people became working in label, and it's just stupid. Just no talent, just narcissists. Didn't know shit about anything. But anyway, so I knew who was. Matter of fact, some of the bands I didn't even like, I knew that they moved units. Or some bands, they brought in a bunch of people, and I tell clubs like, man, because they'd like, oh, we're hurting, we're only going to go alternative. A lot of clubs, when they switch from cover bands to they'd have like half and half cover bands to original bands. When they cut out those cover bands, they started doing bad, but they wanted to be hip. Oh yeah, see, it's it's the grunge, it's alternative. Like, man, fuck that. You need a new soundboard, you need new monitors, you need to keep this place open. Bring these cover bands back. And some of them I like. They were big cover bands in the Midwest. You know, they some of these bands that got signed barely could not even fill a club. Yet they're all hip, and my daddy's rich and got me a lawyer, so that's why I'm on so and so. Couldn't draw flies with shit, man. That was the thing. It became like it's about commerce. You need to have people in the seats. You need to be selling beers. If you don't, buy club, and that's what happened. It's going on to this day. A lot of these people that are top Grammy, whatever, they can't tour. For one, they're lip syncing, and two, nobody's going to come. Um, so back to Lovenginear. So we've been playing with people, and they had, told us this. Oh yeah, we know this. Oh, I'm gonna tell them you're great. And we started getting packaged because we had a press kit. It wasn't just a CD. We had like a picture of the band, a CD, like a press kit. Like it was a thing. Um, it had our address on it, and this, that, and the other. The mail, getting a hold of, phone numbers and this and that. So sure enough, we uh we get these messages, phone calls, stuff like that, packages, and we got three that were pretty cool. One of them was Metal Blade Records, which basically offered us like a record contract, but it was something stupid like 8 album deal, 12 album deal, and they literally put it in writing. And when I talked to them on the phone, because the guys in the band didn't want to do the. I was the one. I was even the youngest guy. I had to learn. That's how I know this stuff because I had to talk to these people in New York, and they're like, "Yeah, and don't be scared away by the albums, 8 to 12 albums. Why we do that is so if you do get successful, we can sell you out to a bigger label, and that's how we'll make our money." But then I talked to other bands. They're like, no, no, no. They'll keep their meat hooks in you. That's how you won't, ask the Goo Goo Dolls. I mean, shit. Um, so I was getting schooled with like Metal Blade. I think it was like a 12 album deal, which is ridiculous. Usually after like a 2 to 3 album deal, contingent on if you sell records, they can drop you at any time. They can drop you even before the album comes out. This, that, and that. We got dropped by an independent label before nothing even, huh? Because the guy ran out of money or something. It's so. Then there was I think it was called Energy Records, and they had a band called Propane. They were more like a hardcore kind of heavier band, and they sent us. Oh, before Metal Blade had sent us a box full of CDs. Everybody that basically was on Metal Blade. I'm talking about King Diamond and all these people that didn't. But it was awesome. Like, oh my god, they sent us like 30 CDs, a box. Propane sent us a box, but not as many. Probably like 5 to 10 CDs. Uh, and they were like, I think it was like a 3 album thing. And these are independents, basically. Metal Blade had like major distribution, and they might have hooked up with a major label anyway. And then Energy Records, who had Propane, who I think had a name for their, again, I'm talking on the phone, mailing. We used to mail. They used to mail shit. And then Relativity Records. So Relativity Records was like, oh, again, they had bands they'd signed in our town who were kind of hipster, but they weren't selling any albums, man. They were rich college kids that their parents could, put down 5 to 10 grand and get them signed. That's all you need is an entertainment attorney and look like you're doing. And we were friendly with these bands. It's just that it's like kind of a drag when everybody knows that you guys. It has to do with these narcissistic politics, kind of nanny boo boo shit. And but you're putting the people in the seats. You're selling the most beer. You got the Budweiser endorsement. You get, and then everybody hates you in town. That's kind of what it was like with Lovenginear. They love to hate, but they would all be at our gigs. So, Relativity Records, again, they sent us a box of other CDs that the bands they had on there. And then somehow it was set up to, they had an office in Chicago. And I'm not talking about an office. It was cool, but it was literally like an apartment, like a brownstone. Um, and they invited us up. And I also had been dealing with Relativity because I was at the time or earlier I'd worked at this record store, so I went up there. The band, another thing. By then the band, the other rest of my band got big head. They didn't want to do any kind of business. I mean, it was horrible trying to deal with them. I'm like, come on, this is part of it. We got to. No, man, it's all about. I just want to play live with this, that. Okay, so I went up there by myself. And that was the first. Like, where's the rest of the band? Oh, they had stuff that all of them had. Yeah, I get there. It was cool. Music playing, phones ringing. They had posters everywhere, CDs, press kits, this, that, and the other. They're pushing bands. Pardon me. And then they're going to have like a barbecue, like not a party, but like you were drinking beers, and they had a rooftop like this in Chicago, like a rooftop like patio area on top. Really cool. I had the best time, and I learned so much. They schooled me. They even knew about the champagne bands, Like right off the bat, they're like, "Oh, Champaign, we don't know if we want to deal with y'all because you know that like it's just those their parents are hiring lawyers and this and that and the other." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I know, And like we don't even want to deal. That's why but we love you guys, and and they'd seen us live somehow or video, and they were super cool. They schooled me. Uh, um, Opened my eyes to a lot of things because a lot of times people are like, "Oh, you're just being angry, man. You're being rude, Greer. You're just that and the other." Like, no, man. This is it's corporate. It was in the corporate level where they. And this is another funny thing. Some of these parents of these kids had also been in shitty bands that also had their parents. You know what I mean? It's like a generational thing. They'd all went to the University of Illinois. They'd all been in a shitty band. They all had money. Their parents were in a shitty band. They got signed. It was just a stupid thing. It ruined shit. But that's what you get: nepotism, cronyism. You're holding down the talent. And I'm not saying including myself. There's other bands that I thought were awesome. They're never gonna. Matter of fact, even these small indie labels in Champaign would sign a band to hold them down. And I knew this. And then when I went to Relativity, they told me like, "Oh yeah, so and so, she's in that band or whatever. He's in his band. Well, they got a little label, and they're keep keeping people down." And they were like, Champagne's never had a unity, and we didn't. See, we were getting like national attention, and we didn't have a scene. We kind of did, but nobody would. There's all this like, "Oh no, you do this, you do that." I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Then we'd go somewhere else and play and be more welcome than like we were way more welcomed in Chicago than we were in our own town. We're just like, what the fuck is all this bickering and I just couldn't stand it. I mean, I stayed away from it. We got to the point where we wouldn't even play in town. We had bigger fish to fry anyway. So Relativity Records schooled me. I think we spent the night because it was a big apartment. I think I spent the night. Go back and I'm literally, they give me boxes of stuff, T-shirts, hat, everything, CDs. And I was like, wow. And then I get back to the band house trying to tell them. They don't want to know. They're this is one of the things why I left Lovenginear. It's like I couldn't deal with these attitudes. Like they didn't want to hear it. I'm like, if you want to get to the next one, yeah, they want to be a big band, a rock star. It's more to me. It was more like, hey man, let's do this for a living. Let's try to. They didn't want to hear any of it. Our bass player was more open to it, but he was older than me, and he just thought like, yeah, whatever. Everything I said, he just looked at me like a younger brother, kind of. Yeah, he didn't know shit about. I mean, so Relativity Records, my friends. Then I heard, like, because I was keeping in touch with them, like something happened, like people were fired, the offices were anyway, or whatever. And I mean, again, we were talking to so many people. Then I got invited again to Relativity. You're like, hey, it's so and so Relativity, you want to come up? And I remember meeting her. I was like, oh yeah, So I was like, yeah, come, gave the address, which was a different address. I should have known better. But I couldn't get anybody to go with me. Which it kind of turned anyway. Get in my car, drive to Chicago, and it's like 2 hours from like Champaign to Chicago, half an hour and a half, something like that. With traffic about 2. And this was in Wrigleyville, even the offices of Relativity. It wasn't too far from the Relativity office. And I get there, cool. There's restaurants and bars, things going on, brownstones. And I get there and I knock on the door. I'm buzzed up. And it's this girl who had worked at Relativity. So as soon as I walk in, I know it's just her apartment. I'm like, what is this? She's like, oh, kind of flirting. And she knew I had a girlfriend. And like, oh, no. I said, well, where's everybody else? Let's go to Relativity. Well, no, see what happens. I got you up here. And she actually had an itinerary, what we're going to do that day, like printed out. That's another thing. All their itineraries, like, okay, at 3:00, we hit here. By 4, we're going here. 5. She had it until like 1 a.m. Like, oh, then we're going to throw a party here, and we're going to go to the Crowbar, and then we're going to hit, the Metro. And I was like, whoa. I didn't come here to party, This is business to me, man. I was dead serious. Like, I was in my early 20s. I think I was like 21 or 22, but I was still like wanted to learn everything about the business because that's what I wanted to do. I'd already been through some stuff with just clubs and independent label and stuff like that I knew that we needed to control our intellectual property and keep the band name and just try, just figuring stuff out. Because if you sign to a label, usually you have to sign away the name. Sometimes it just depends. So, but I didn't know any of this. I didn't know, so I had to learn. And so she's like, "Oh yeah, here's the itinerary. Oh my god, and you're gonna be on the back of my scooter." So in her mind, she invited me up there to just go party and wanted me to get on the back of her scooter. I'm 6'2", man, like the back of a scooter. I'm not gonna be in Chicago. No, no. I literally started walking out, and she followed me down. And it turned out she'd been fired from Relativity, but she was going to be working for somebody. And I was like, oh my God, I got lured down here by some girl who wants to, like, not that she was ugly or anything. It's just that I had a girlfriend and this was business and I would not mix. That creeped me out because that's what another thing would happen. People would want to, you know, I ain't into that. This is strictly business. I don't want to think about anything else except this. I'm already in love. I'm living with my girlfriend. Why would I even want to, huh? People did, but I wouldn't do it. So I was there for literally like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and got back in my car and drove home. She had lied to me. I thought that oh yeah, we're going to the Relativity office, is that there? Because we'd been talking. And then something happened. Like I said, something happened like for a week or two. I wouldn't contacted them, and somebody else in a band that was signed to Relativity in town or a subsidiary of one, oh no, there's a breakup. Our band's worried, something's going on. There's a buyout, blah blah blah. Who knows? Um, uh, but there was no internet. I did call before I left. I thought everything was cool. I'd already been there once before, and yeah, you just you live and learn. To me, it was just like my time and my gas money. And I thought I'll never do that again. I'll never be, luckily we hadn't signed, because they were wanting us. At the time we were kind of a hot commodity, and we could have signed to a bunch of label. Well, we were getting a lot of offers, but mostly me. I was like, wait a minute, we got to filter through this. We can't, and that's maybe why I was getting some of the attitude. Like people thought that, like, oh, Charlie, but I was starting to learn that they didn't know anything. All they knew was like booking gigs at club. That's it. When we got management out of Chicago, they didn't like the manager. They didn't want to talk to him. This, that. And it's like, man, we got to communicate with, we got to connect with people. No, their little small world. Like I just want to deal with people in town. Like, man, we can't go to the next level if you're just dealing with people in town. Huh? And it was always me that went and tried to do the business side of the, But at clubs, sometimes they keep me out of the office to know how much money. See, that's another reason I quit. I found out that we were making more money and I wasn't getting it. And some certain band members were taking money. And I've never really talked about it, never approached them. I know they know I know. And the club owners know, it's just like, and why would they do that? And when I quit Lovenginear, like, oh, you can't quit Lovenginear, which honestly I couldn't because I'd signed a management contract. I had to do an extra year. I quit in 94. And then I did into 95, the rest of these gigs they booked, not a tour, but like, hey, around here and there, Illinois area, Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, and we're playing with all kinds of bands from New York, Piss Factory, and just everybody. And other bands stealing your, and seeing them getting signed when we had just like blown them off stage, selling more units. I've talked about certain bands stealing my kind of thing that I did on stage. And next thing you know, you see them, they're doing what I did on stage. Like, what in the hell? Just obvious. Like they came to a town, like you're not going to know. And people let them know. Like after the gig, they took off. They didn't give a shit. It was kind of brutal. Again, all we had was a booking manager out of Chicago. And because we brought people in the seats. We sold beer. That's what it's about. I mean, you're gonna, again, if you have probably to this day, if you can afford a good entertainment attorney, you'll get some kind of whatever it is sign. Well, who knows? But if you think you're going to do it on the merit of your song, no. You have to have a fan base. You have to sell tickets or entry fees or whatever, and beer and bought liquor. That's it. That's when you're coming up. You're not selling booze. You're not going to be. You'll be playing Monday night instead of Saturday night. And I had to learn that. And it was all like, okay, on a Monday night, you got to do $500 on a Monday. You got to do like 700 on a Wednesday. Then by then we'll give you a Friday night, and you got to do like 1,000. And then if you do that, then on Saturday you got to do like 2,000, and then you got to keep that up. And this is that. A lot of people didn't even know. And they were telling me like, don't say anything. This was like again, there was all this stuff that people kind of knew, but they didn't want to talk about. Like booking agents. These booking agents will book you a tour. They want people to know that you pay them. And I always thought that was stupid. Like they kind of be like, yeah, man, give us $800. We'll book you this, that. Don't tell anybody. Why would you? Who gives a fuck? It's a business. We don't want. It was weird. Why they would not? It's like sabotaging themselves. And we, Lovenginear, were offered to play all over the place. We were offered to go out to LA. The rest of the guys didn't want to do it. They were too comfortable in their own lives. They didn't want to. I should have left for LA earlier. Right around this time, I was offered to come out there. Hey, this management. I said, no, hang. I stuck it out, and I shouldn't have, because I left Champaign in 94, moved to St. Louis. Then I didn't move to LA till 98. I should have moved to LA in like 92, 93, maybe even earlier. But you live and learn. And we were offered to play in New York. And then how you do that, you book shows along the way. You just don't drive to New York and do one gig. I mean, I guess you could, but you get a booking agent and you're like, hey, play Indiana, wherever, Ohio, Pennsylvania, whatever the route is to New York. And that's what you do. Now, I didn't want to do that. Again, it was tough to, especially once we got to a certain level where we were doing like radio interviews regionally and stuff like that, and getting reviews in magazines. Rip magazine was like a big, like hard rock, heavy metal kind of mag. And we were named a buzz band because they had like every month at the end of they had a buzz band, and we were a Rip buzz band. We'd been getting reviews from like San Francisco to New York. We had people, again, we were sending us packages, and then people changed instantly. Got to the point where some of the people in the band wouldn't talk to fans. They'd say, hello, how you doing? He'd just walk on by, arrogant. Then he started doing that to us. It's like, dude, like we couldn't even talk. Sometimes he would show up for rehearsal. We try to talk to him. He's just like kind of got this attitude, do the rehearsal and leave. And that went on for months that's why I quit. Like, I can't take this. It's like not verbal abuse, but like a form of abuse that like, I just wasn't going to, it's hard to, you don't want to create with people. And he's like, oh yeah, you need to write some music. And for that, we were going to record another album, and I was writing music. They were too, but they were like in a big, they had like writer's block big time, because that's what happens. You start going in that thinking you're this, that, the other. Your creative spark is gone. You don't have that happy energy anymore. No, I'm a rock star, local rock star. Like, who gives a fuck? And I started writing and demoing on my own. I used to have like a little 4-track, and I, had a drum machine. Not even a drum. It was like a keyboard that had drum patterns. So yeah, it kind of sounded weird, but it was just like, it was a demo just to get it down on tape so they could ship to. No, we don't like anything. Then later on, when I quit the band and I started doing other things, I'd run into them. They're like, man, why didn't you bring these songs to us? I liked it. You turned them away. You turned them down. Oh, I did. Yeah, you did. Yes, you did. Same thing happened when I was in LA and La Mata. It's almost like the same thing. Certain people were like kind of cool and this, that, and then we start getting a buzz, and then they start sabotaging stuff and having attitudes. And I'd bring songs, and they're like, no, Then I quit La Mata, and when I released my first album after that, why didn't you bring that to the band? I did. You said no. All of matter of fact, later on, La Mata stayed together, had another lineup, and they covered some of my songs, the songs that I had approached them with. Didn't turn me down. I record them, and then they cover them, and then I wrote songs for them. And quite honestly, even though he's still a bro, There's no mention of my name on any of those releases. Not a mention. Not that I wrote the song, none of that. And that to this day is kind of like, it's just like, man, you can't do that. Yeah, it's bad for me, but look at you. That's gonna people know more about it. It's about you, not me. People love me. They feel sorry that I was treated like that by you. Don't you get it? People don't get that. It's a boomerang effect. It comes back to you, man. You don't have to be a psychiatrist to know this. Everybody's gonna know. I mean, people are weird. I lived in LA for 24 years, and I used to hang out at clubs a lot, and bars, and I lived in Echo Park, and I went in Silver Lake. It's called the Silver Lake Lounge. It's basically a bar, but they call it a club. And hipsters play there, I just happened to go by myself. I was by myself, just having a beer, and there was some band, and I didn't even know the band, and I was sitting at the back, and some people knew who I was, so I had like a table, and there was like 3 or 4 people like, "Oh, Charlie, hey, oh, hanging out." Then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, we're going to do a Charlie Greer song," and the people there were like, "Did you know this band? Did you set this up?" Like, no, I've never. In fact, that's the first time that happened to me. Like, they're going to play one of my songs. And then people were like, "There's Charlie, hey." And I stood up and had a beer. And the band were kind of looking strange. And they did one of my songs. So after the gig, I went up to like thank them or, hey, what blew me off. Like, you're a fan of mine. You even announced that you're going to do one of my songs, which is cool. But I go up to say hello and thank you. No, yeah, you're just, huh? I don't get people, man. By then, I had a crowd of people behind me. Well, guess what? That boomerang effect, they go after the band. People are being rude. Like, why are you treating Charlie like this, man? What the fuck? Self-sabotage, perhaps? I don't know. It wasn't like they're starstruck or anything. It just, people are just, I don't get it. I never would. I've auditioned for bigger bands later on in the 90s. And by then I knew the game. I knew all what it was about. I'd be approached and literally want to be like a salary guy. None of the publishing, none of the merchandise. Of course, I'm joining a bigger band that's already existed, but it was like, no. Nuh-uh. And then sometimes they just didn't like me. One time it was because of age. These guys have been around forever. And the audition was literally meeting their manager at his like mansion and just having beers with these old British dudes. And they're just like, "Ain't gonna work out, mate." I was like, "Yeah, because you guys are with their turquoise, jewelry and all that, and in leather." And it's just like, seriously, you're not going on stage. And they're haggard old ass. And I was just in like jeans and a leather jacket, they no. And I just didn't, again, it's age. I was like 23, 24. They're like in their 50s. They like my music. They like it, but it was just, what are you going to do? And in certain other bands, again, it was like, look, this is another, and I got an argument that I'm not going to say who it was, but he wanted me to write, but then give him all the publishing, meaning the songwriting credit. Like, he could write music, he couldn't do lyrics or melodies. And then once the song was, he wanted to, no, he got really mad on the phone. Again, this is before internet, email. Pardon me. And he was signed to a major label, but they were going to be one last album. The singer had quit, probably because of this reason. It was and then of course, that flopped. Then he went on to a bigger band and was in that band. And then like when I was with ASCAP, and I guess technically I still am, because Lovenginear was through ASCAP, and then my solo stuff I went with BMI. That's a publishing. They track your song where you're publishing, and then through BMI, I was like the BBC owns some of the Lovenginear stuff. And then what? Did I sign something? I don't remember. Again, it's all like, especially back then, there was a lot of thievery and con men, and I'm owed money through like major from Discovery Channel, VH1, Viacom have never paid me, and this is back in the day. This is around like the late '90s, early 2000s, and I'll never see that one. And quite honestly, I don't even know what they used. Like Viacom used my Discovery Channel. Used some money. Yeah. What? Well, shit. How am I going to go something I don't even, what are you going to do? It sours it for musicians because they want to be like, hey, I'm a songwriter, I'm an artist, I create this, that, and the other. And then you get around these soured thieves, that it steals your creativity. The thrill is gone. You go to dental school just to change. Fuck it, I'll get married. Hell, settle down. Go work at my parents' store. Who knows? So be forewarned. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to support the channel, which you do, the information is in the description for Zelle. And I love y'all. Again, I do this every day, rant like a madman. So I'll be back tomorrow. Yes. But I love y'all. Be blessed. Cheers.